ngithatha leli thuba ukubonga sengibingelelile eqaleni uma ngivula inkonzo ngifisa ukubonga njengamanje inkonzo yonke uNkulunkulu asipha yona. I really say this ngaso sonke isikhathi, and I mean it from the depth of my heart, and I want to repeat it. I am really privileged to serve such a wonderful church. It is one privilege to serve a church. But amabandla wafani.
Amen.
And I'm sure every single church leader in any church would say that they are privileged to lead the church of God, the people of God, to be part of the gospel, to be given a small part to play embusweni kaNkulunkulu. But to really have an opportunity to lead such a wonderful church. And ngifisa ukusho lokhu, I'm not buying your face, and I'm not comparing churches because I can't. I have not had the privilege of leading different churches. See, that too is a privilege. But I haven't had that privilege, and I don't think I will have that privilege. Yabona abanye abantu mabeshiya inkonzo abakhule kuzo baseva kuzo bayiqale lenye bane privilege ke lapho ngoba ngasho ukuthi cha ngaqala lapha ngaphatha lapha ngasuka ngayophatha lapha, and that is a privilege too. I don't have that, and I don't think I will have that. But with the little that I know and I've experienced, you are a wonderful church.
Amen.
I have never come across a church like the Church of the Holy Ghost. And I mean that from the depth of my heart.
Amen.
It doesn't make you perfect. It doesn't make you any greater than any other church.
Amen.
Absolutely not. You know you are not.
Amen.
You are like a woman that is loved by her husband. And he says, I don't see anybody else in my life that could ever fill the gap that you have come and filled and fulfilled in my life. And you look around and you're like, yo, so you must just know, Uguti, there are other women that are probably more beautiful and are all sorts of things for their partners. But for your partner, you are the world, and truthfully so. And therefore, to me, you are that. You are the most wonderful church that I have the privilege and the pride to lead. And I want to appreciate, as namhlanje we commemorate this day, uNkulunkulu angimisa ngalo phakathi kwebandla. I want to appreciate that God has created the space for me to give expression to the gift that He has given me, which I didn't even know I had. Listening to every single thing that has been said, it is always very humbling when you listen to people talk about you. It feels unnatural, and for some of us a little bit uncomfortable too. But at the same time, affirming in some way, because these are things that people pick up about you in your natural state. You are not acting. You are being you. You are carrying out your character. And people pick out certain things that are consistent that they also then confirm later on, especially with regards to leadership. And therefore, I really just want to appreciate every single word coming from the family. Like I said a couple of weeks ago, I met them for the first time on the 23rd of July, and it was a very weird experience, but the way I was received. And I really want to say this, Bazalwane, in the Church of the Holy Ghost, a family will always remain an important family. And
Amen.
I want you to know that. I want you to know, and I'm glad we don't have titles in the church and positions that you give to people that are honored, because there is nothing that you can give. There's nothing that you can do. It is a spiritual duty that fell upon a man and his family, because they were trusted. And so it is something that nobody can ever take away. You see, there are a lot of people, and I'm going to get a little bit political because I'm allowed to on this day, because God is a political God. There are a lot of people who would have loved to be in the position that Ulungwana was in. There are a lot of people who would have wanted, and I know, for example, when I first arrived, there were people who said, but why him? Why him? Why uNkulunkulu boneni, inceki boneni kwaKwala? Because there were people that my grandfather was closer to, much more close to. There were people that he even visited Emakaya Abo. who therefore felt they were quite entitled to receive, and they had a better connection and family understanding and history. But it wasn't those people. When it came to a moment, and I want to say this, it was not him, but God who was guiding him. God didn't say to him, now, hambe ehlotsheni zakho nabangani bakho bathandayo enkonzweni ohlala nabo kube mnandi nabo. He pointed him to a man. My grandfather has never been to Kwakwala. He just knew the man, but he had never been to his house. But he knew, and what I'm told, when he shared nabaqotsha babethuza kwakho ukuthi ngifuna ukuthi ayibakwala uthi ngoba ukwala abantwana bakho bakhulise kahle, so uNkulunkulu ungibonisile ukuthi uyoyinakekela ingane yakho and fulfill what God wanted him to fulfill, and without even having gone there. So I want you to know this, ukuthi regardless of the changes in time, the seasons in time, this is something that can never be taken away from this family. But if anything, I would really appreciate for the church to continue to honor that family. You don't have to worship them, of course, you don't have to do anything, but to know ukuthi that is the womb, that carried this church at a time where it mattered the most.
Amen.
I only spent 4.5 years, Kwakwala, physically. But it feels like my entire life was spent there. And it feels like they shaped in a large part of my life, even though it was only 4.5 years. And that is something that needs to be forever part of the history of the church. I want to thank Katu for the wonderful words that you shared. And it's really encouraging to know that people remember. You know, sometimes when we preach, and I'm sure God can attest to this, you sometimes wonder if people will remember. And when you listen to people remember things that you yourself have forgotten, and they go back to the points that were made at the time, it is very encouraging as a leader. For me personally, you've made my day to know what is somebody, because I feel like every time I talk about the fact that I have dreadlocks, people think it's a lie, you know, because I don't even have a picture. I don't even have a single picture with dreadlocks, and I really think I looked quite, let's just say, I would have had more ties coming, you know, with those dreadlocks, and I took care of them. And out of respect for the church, you know, sometimes we do things. I love the church, and I've always loved the church. And out of respect for the church, I remember how I shaved my dreadlocks. I was going to a March conference in Zinkonzo, because it was before I was ordained. And I knew it, but I would never be received. I just knew, this is just not going to fly. And I want to say this to young people who sometimes struggle with choices. You know, it was a choice between either going to the conference or keeping my dreadlocks. That's what it came down to. And the dreadlocks had to go, because I wanted to go to the conference.
Amen.
And I walked and I went to a salon at Bramfontein, because I was still at varsity at the time. And I said to this guy, so he thought I was there to treat my dreadlock and faggy molding cream and all of those things. And I said, no, I'm here to shave them. And he looked at me and he's like, hey, Ubiza, his partner, he's like, hey, uyamuzwa lo. So the other one says, no, aswakunda my dreadlocks, siyawenza. Aswakunda. And I was like, no, I'm here to shave. And he said to me, but why would you want to do that? Because people are coming to us, ukuthi sizobenza my dreads, and you have beautiful hair. I still have beautiful hair and a full hair. And he says, you've got beautiful hair, and I can see you've invested so much in your dreads. Why would you want to take them off? And I said, because I'm going to church, and I know they are not going to be accepted. And down they went. So it is really quite affirming to know that there's someone who at least had seen me with those dreadlocks in the church. Amen.
Amen.
But I think more than giving me the space to express the gift, I really appreciate the fact that you have, in return, appreciated and honored me and the leadership that God has given me in the manner that you have. because as it has been said, you know, it has been a long journey, and the story gets told every year. It never gets old. And the fact that I was very, very, very young, I think today, at the age that I'm at right now, I have an even greater appreciation of what that meant and how young I was. I think when I was at that age, you know, sometimes musemncane ucabanga ukuthi umdala, ucabanga ukuthi usukhulile, and you feel like you can do things. But when I stand where I am today, and I look back at that time, and I look at people that are the age that I was when God called me, I realize how young I was, and therefore I realize that none of those things could have happened if it wasn't for God. None of those things could have happened, and perhaps none of those things should have happened. Amen. Amen. I having acknowledged the church, I really want to say that I know what every preacher and every leader, spiritual leader, would be most fortunate to lead a church like this. I say this in a healthy way. I know I'm the envy of most of my friends who are in ministry, in a good way, and they say it when they say, we look at your church and how your church is, and how your church loves, and how your church respects, and how orderly. Somebody said to me, yesterday when she called me, and she said to me, you know, you've taught us to be orderly. And I said, what do you mean? So I called her. I said, what do you mean I've taught you to be orderly? Well, you're not orderly. She said, no, nothing in order. You know? So we started talking about certain things. And I really need to get through this very quickly with you, but allow me, and Dr. Nkosana Zuma, please allow us just a couple of more minutes. But we were talking about this, and so we went back, and this is a story that we always laugh about, Uguti. When I took over the church, and we were still Sibambi Mhlangano Tempelini Sibonamandla, because that was the size, but also there was the only space that we knew but also comfortable with, because as a church we are very territorial, and we wanted to have our conferences only in our spaces. And there was just so much disorder. Abantu bakamoya ke lawo beza njengoba benjalo namasaka abo emhlangano baze emhlangano bazokhonza uNkulunkulu nje bona into eziningi ukuthi bazolalaphi kanjani. And we had to make shift, you know, unyembe engakabu conference director, khona abanye conference director, and we had to create amatende lapha ya la kuba khona imoto manje ukuthi abantu balale khona. And we did everything that we could. I've shared this story with you so many times, but I just feel like sharing it again. And I remember driving up the next morning during the conference week, but must have been Tuesday or whatever, as abantu beqala banda, and finding abazalwane banekile laphaya othangweni lethempeli baneke impahla zabo ezi public nezi private, you know, bayikhulekele bajabulile abantu bakaNkulunkulu. And I was like, what in the name of Christ is this? You know, and I knew that day, you know, this is coming to an end. You know, we had arrangements with schools in the nearby area, and I had a friend who lived in the area who had a big house, and I said, ngithi benzeni manje Ndlovu okundlovu isibongo sakhe since pastor on labantu ngibavulela umuzi wami bakhululeke benze yonke into ngabafaka amakamera ngathi khululekani, just make it your home. Abantu bafika nama-prama stove babasa ama-prama stove emakamereni bayapheka endlini zabo emarumini engibabeke kona lapha. Uma ngithi no nasi istove ekitchen bathi hayi khululeka Ndlovu, so right. And let me tell you, and I'm going to embarrass some people right now. I'm allowed, it's my day. No, we are orderly now. What a low moya. Now, I was told a story by umnumzana ukhuzwayo there at the back, undlela ukuthi njoba sekhona ithempeli elihle manje lapha eMzinkonzo. And you would think ukuthi nethempeli liletha angathi impucuze kodwa ukuthi nabantu phela nabo babe kuleyo ndawo but abantu bakamoya abantu bakamoya manje ke leliya holo lela abantu la sasikhonza khona ngemhlangano kungakho u10 sekwindawo yokulala ngasemva kwakhuzwayo. So recently in the recent years I got a story zokuthi umzali omncane uJeffrey umzali kaNdlela waphuma lapha eksene ekhubekile uthi uyavuka eksene uthola uthangweni lakhe baleka into zabo ezi public nezi private khona la nothandweni lo uthango lwakhe lu-colorful abantu basethempelini behlela umoya bajabulile bona nje siyomkhonza uNkulunkulu sabizwa ngomoya kuthiwa waphuma wabalanda khona athi ngibalandile ngathi ewu ninjani kanti ningcolile ngizokwehlela umoya ngishiya amadilosi. Hallelujah bazalwane. So the order that we have brought into the church, it is not a small job. Uma khona izinto uNkulunkulu akumele sibonge ngazo yizo zona lezo ukuthi we have brought abantu bakaNkulunkulu ebungcweleni bomphefumulo nobenyama. Amen. Did I say you are loving? You are a very loving church. Some of you have shared with me and said, I've made leadership to look easy over the 21 years. And I truly believe, Uguti, besides that, and I don't want to downplay what God has done in my life and my character, but I truly think, Uguti, you have also made it easy to be led. Because no matter how easy you are as a leader or how you make it look easy, but if people make it difficult for you, it will be difficult. But the 21 years have not been a breeze, but it has been a walk, a lovely walk, because you as a church have really made it easy for me. And making it easy does not necessarily mean that we have agreed on everything and that we have just made things happen. There were times where we struggled. There were times where we failed in certain things. But what I do know for a fact is that your commitment, your passion, your loyalty towards the leadership of this church, not just to me, but towards the leadership of this church, is unquestionable. And that is what has really been the greatest gift for me over the 21 years. So today I really just want to simply say thank you. That's all I really want to say to you. Just thank you. Thank you for every single thing that you have done, that you continue to do. For every prayer that you have prayed. I know prayer works because I see your prayer work in my life on a daily basis. It is very comforting to know that there are people who pray for you more than you pray for yourself, as they say. And I know that this church prays for me, and for that I'm eternally grateful. Amen. Bazalwane, I'm going to try, but allow me. Amen. Amen. Because this is an important day, and this day is not just about me, but it is about something bigger than me. It is about God, and it is about the church. So allow me, I'm going to try as much as I can, but allow me. When I was reflecting on this, firstly, I think very few people, I'm greater than the Queen of England. Hallelujah. The Queen of England has got 2 birthdays. The day, her state birthday, the national birthday, and then the day on which she was born. So she's one of the few people. In Europe, it's a big thing, and other monarchies and other countries as well have 2 birthdays. And it becomes a big thing, which the Queen gets celebrated on her birthday as well as on her state birthday. I'm greater than the Queen of England because I get to be celebrated 3 times. Amen. And it's just so beautiful. It is 3 successive months. So this church, there is no period that is as important as May, June, July. Amen. And I don't think other leaders ever experienced the type of celebration ngathi uNkulunkulu uyanezela ukuthi I'm going to celebrate. So if you don't get to celebrate me in May, you will definitely celebrate me in June. If you miss celebrating me in June, you will celebrate me in July. God, uNkulunkulu nje ngathi ufuna ukugcizelela. I had a sister. She's passed on. My elder sister, whom my dad had before he got married, and she used to say, "Noma ungangithandi uyozungithande." You know, and it was the first time I used to hear that. And she would say to people, "Ungangithandi uyozangithande." She was very, very feisty, and I guess this is exactly what God has done here. It's like, you know what, you are just going to have to. And for those, of course, like you, who are very loving, they make sure that they don't miss that. So in May, I received gifts and messages of support, because May is about the leadership of the church. It is not about the church, as I said before. Ilanga lokumiswa kobuholi bebandla. Umhla ka-9 kuMay. And so when you celebrate May 9, you celebrate me. Amen. You celebrate my office. Amen. And of course, June is a very personal day. And but when you celebrate June, you're also celebrating even those who came before me, because I am part of them. So when I was born on the 27th of June, they were born as well. Amen. And when we get into July, it gets complicated because we really celebrate a whole lot of things. July is one of those months in the church that is very complex, that is beautiful. But everything that has happened in July revolves around leadership. One of the things that has never been a big thing in the church, but I guess it needs to become so, more so now as we get in, because nobody will tell our story but us. But one of the things that is important about July is that the founder of this church, Umholi Mqalisi, was born in July. He was born on the 4th of July. And so for me, July has taken an even greater meaning, because there's just a whole lot of themes in this month. But I want to, as we get into this, start a little bit and pick up that, you know, on this day, on the 11th of July, this is today, the 11th of July, on this day, Amen, in 1992, the church experienced something that it had never experienced before. Because whilst we know ukuthi abaholi, they've gone through difficulties and challenges, they had always endured those and suffered in silence. They had never complained, they had never made their struggles public, they had never openly talked about the behind the scenes happenings in leadership. We know ukuthi uMqalisi suffered. We know ukuthi uMqalisi was challenged in leadership. We know ukuthi there were many attempts to either unseat him from the role and the position that God had placed him in, but also towards the end of his life, we know that there were many attempts on his life. But he himself never personally addressed that in Ebandla. He may have talked about it with those who were close to him, particularly Ababesebenzi Nkonzo, but he never openly engaged the church about the struggles that he went through. But we get to understand the struggles that we went through Inceku. We didn't hear that from Mqalisi, but we get to know it through Inceku, because Inceku, uma ikhuluma ngokumiswa kwayo, ikhuluma ngokubaleka kwayo, ibalekela umsebenzi wevangeli, ithi ngangingafuni ukungena kulo msebenzi ngoba ngangibone indlela umzali ahlupheka ngayo. Amen. Nendlela abantu abamhlupha ngayo bembangisa umsebenzi uNkulunkulu ayimisele wona. And therefore I did not want to go through that. And those are important words and messages that we need to keep in our minds. See, it is important for any person who grows up in this church, but any person who joins this church, to understand the history of this church and the dynamics that have shaped us into what we are and what we have become. And so he talked about his fear, because it was a fear, where he says, ngangingafuni, kodwa uNkulunkulu wangicindezela. And then he talks about the day when he was ordained, ukumiswa kwenceku, it was not a glorious affair as perhaps ukumiswa kwami was or ukumiswa kukaMqalisi was. May 9 was a personal day for Umqalisi, but it is celebrated because nobody contested that, and there was no discussion phakathi kwabantu around May 9. Even June 17, there was no contest. July 10th, Misa, it is a spiritual manifestation of what God was doing. And on that particular day, but October the 5th was a very difficult day, because that day was really a day where the church was put on a platter and a decision had to be made. It in 11 July 1992. It kwakunzima, and I see that the team has shared that with the church. Kwakunzima ithi because kwakumele ngalelo langa kwenziwe isinqumo sokuthi inkonzi iyaqhubeka noma inkonzi yafa. Now, for people who experienced ubuholi bebandla during the good times during the good times at the peak yokusebenza kwakhe namandla kaNkulunkulu, they would be forgiven for forgetting that this man's start in ministry was not easy. And they would even be forgiven for underestimating how difficult it was. For us who grew up, it was not spoken about quite a lot, but now and again, when it was mentioned, particularly by my grandmother, she would always say, "Kwakunzima kakhulu." And it got to a point la wawuthi mawuhamba emission ubusi kuthiwa wena ungakuphi, and uma uthi uhamba nonkosana omkhulu ushawe. It got to that level where there were clearly sides as to when uhamba ngakuphi. So when we look at what we are going through, of course, I think the distinguishing factor of what I have gone through is that it has prolonged. It has gone on for longer than other battles and other conflicts have. But certainly the themes are the same. But on this day, on the 11th of July 1992, he comes in, ubiza umhlangano wamalunga, and this becomes a defining moment in leadership, because he says, today we are back at that. We are back where we were in 1959. And there are attempts. And I remember the first word he had said, the previous Sabbath, and he said, namhlanje ngifuna ukunitshela mzinkonzo ukuthi ngiyazingelwa. And that word stuck, because it is not characteristic of what you would associate with a spiritual leader of the magnitude that our spiritual father was. And he went on to unpack the things that were happening in his life and the many attempts. There were two very overt attempts on his life of assassination at home. And that was the battle that he was under. And he moves on to say, namhlanje ngizobikela amalunga onke ngiwabizile because ngingedwa, angisenamuntu, ngisele ngedwa. And that moment for me became a moment where God shifted. And he knew that this would end, this will come to an end. In other words, that the life of Inlewe at that time was going to come to an end, but God shifted. And Mangite, God shifted. The entire story that has been shared about my journey, Yogi Sogagwala, was around protection. And the protection was around the future of the church. And so these are important things for all of us to remember, and for the entire church, noma bekhula kangakanani abantu ebandleni and noma kumnandi kangakanani, for us to always remember where we come from, because people will come and distort the past and the history, and people will come and tell the history from their own perspective to further their own motives. But history does not change. History is what it is. And what we have been dealt with as a church with regards to leadership is something that should never be erased. It is something that is very uncomfortable to talk about. It is something that some of us sometimes experience shame when we talk about it. But we need to move beyond the emotions of it. When we celebrate God and what God has done, you cannot celebrate God. I said this somewhere, ngathi awukwazi ukubongela inkosi ngesintu ke kakhulukazi ngesizulu uma kuthula izibongo zenkosi. Uma kubongelwa inkosi kubongwa izimpi ezingqobile. Ngakho awukwazi ukubongela inkosi ungathinti indawo nezimpi la ingqobe khona. Amen. And so when we celebrate these days and these events in the church, and our church is very rich in those, we have to touch on those uncomfortable parts, but not with pain and regret, but with great celebration, because this is where God has brought us from. Amen. To this point as a Amen. Church. It is a fact, Bazalwane, 21 years later, that God has kept me in this role in leadership. That for a number of people, they thought, maybe give it 2 years or 3 years. They thought by year 3, maybe by year 5 at most, it would have ended. That I would have gone, there were so many expectations of how this could fail. And in reality, there was such a great chance that this could fail. Because God took a risk on us. God took a risk on me. And therefore there was a real chance that this thing would fail. Forget the fact that there were people who expect, there are people who still expect that it would. But back then, there was a higher chance. I was a risk, as I remain a risk to the church. But I was a greater risk then. 21 years later, God has said, well, if you didn't think it was true then, look at it now. Amen. If you didn't think that it was true then, look at it now. God is doing amazing things in this church. God has done amazing things in my life. When I listen to people talk about what God has done over the years and the messages that we have shared and the culture that we have shifted in the church together with the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, we know that God is with us indeed. Thula makubegini. Thula kubazalwane. Now, I want to touch on this because when we listen to the words that Holy Nzegu said on this day, on the 11th of July 1992, he talked about his fears. And I also think, as parents, what we are afraid of, we project onto our children. And you want to make sure that your child doesn't go through that, what you went through. So you tend to be stricter and tougher and protect them from that pain because you know what it feels like. And I know for a fact that because he experienced that in his life, he did not want anybody who would come after him to experience that. That is why at the end of that meeting, one of the words that rings in my mind, I remember the first time I watched that video, I was alone at home, I wept, I cried. When he said, ebandleni, ngiyabonga, ngesupport yonke ninginikeze yona, asibambaneni sibe munye. Wathi, lokho enikwenze kimi, ningagcini niqeda ngisho ngoba kuyimina olana namhlanje nalo oyoma la ningisupporte kanje. Amen. When I listened to those the first time, I cried. Because it helped me for the first time to understand the source of the immense support that I received from the church. It made me understand that already someone paved the way and asked for that support even before I was there. And that what I was seeing happening actually had nothing to do with how cute and how humble I was, but it was the fact that people were being faithful to the one that asked for it. Even those who didn't know, who only came across these words later, but there was an air in the house spiritually and a sense of, we need to do this. We need to provide this support. But he did so because he knew what it was. He saw it with his father, and he experienced it himself personally. And therefore, on this day, as we celebrate my 21 years in leadership, but we celebrate the leadership of the church, I want to touch on something that is often not talked about, and that is the fear that leaders have. Every leader who gets called by God has a fear. And every leader that gets called by God has a sense of insecurity that they experience. And as a church, it is very important, as you support and as you are there with your leader, to understand the insecurities that they have had to overcome in order for them to serve you. I think there is no point in talking about my insecurities, because I think they've been, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and so I've shared a whole lot of things with you. And you've been kind and generous to me. But it is always important as we follow leaders and support leaders, which is why earlier on I was saying, even with our government, we need to speak positively, we need to support them. Because every leader is insecure. Doesn't matter who they are. Every leader, for time immemorial, if you go back to the medieval times in Europe, leadership has always been contested. And you go to biblical times, people get killed over leadership roles. So singathi, ukhole inkonzo, but people get killed. And for nothing, because there is no, akofa. When I took over the church in 1999, we had absolutely nothing. We had absolutely nothing. I was given a bank account that had 18,000 rands in it only. And that's where we had to start off from. And so you would think, people would want to fight. But of course, where the church comes from and what the church has over the years that it has accumulated, obviously maybe for some people there was a reason for them to fight for this leadership. But for a person who gets called by God, for you it is, I'd love to live my life without this, without this entanglement. But I realize this week that word is maybe a little bit too sensitive. But without, for those who know, if you know, you know. So without all of these things, some of us just prefer to just live private lives. I want us to go to a leader in the Bible. And whenever we think about leadership in the church, we all think about who's the top leader when it comes to religion in the church that we all think about. It's Paul. So it says Moses. Paul as well, but actually Moses. Yes. If there's one leader that is celebrated across religions, it is Moses. That is held as, in psychology, you have the father of psychology, and that is Freud. In religion, well, you have the father of all religions, which is Abraham. But Abraham did not lead an organized movement. He received the blessing and he gave birth. But from there, the first person who leads an organized movement, people walking with God, is Moses. Amen. And for generations, Moses became the guiding star of what leadership is, spiritual leadership is, but also became the authority figure when it comes to the law of God and the conscience and the heart of God. He is the one leader who people can say, this man died without sin, and if ever there was a sin, nobody is qualified to call it upon him, because he was a man who walked with God. But when we go to Moses, we pick up that when God called Moses, Moses was insecure. Moses was an unlikely leader He was an unlikely leader to be called for the type of work that God wanted him to do. And he knew it. So he was in touch with his own strengths and his weaknesses, and he knew that, you are making a mistake. I'm not the one. And there are 5 reasons that Moses gives to God that in his negotiation with God, in his pushback on his calling, and in his fear of this role that he's been called to perform, he feels these are the reasons why I'm not the right person. I'd like somebody to read for me. And if we go to the book of Exodus 3, I'm going to straddle between chapters 3 and 4. So if you can just touch on Exodus 3 and verse 11.
Exodus 3, did I go to 3
Verse 11.
But Moses said to God, I am nobody. How can I go to the kings and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?
Amen. Moses says to God, but God, I am nobody. I'm nobody. How can I go to the kings and ask them to release the Israelites? How can I go to that power? How can I go to the Pharaoh and ask him to release? Remember, Moses was raised in Egypt. And so he understands the power in Egypt. He understood who Pharaoh is. So it's not just like walking up to an ordinary person and say, hey, release the children of Israel. He understood that, first of all, to even get into the presence of this person, let alone the fact that I escaped and I committed a crime in Egypt, but to now go and be in the presence of Pharaoh as a king and an ultimate power. I'm doing some work right now professionally with the Middle East, people in the Middle East, and there's projects that are commissioned by the king in Dubai. And these are multi-million rand projects. Just this coming week I'm starting a project, and I can't disclose much about it, but there's one role that needs to be filled in a company that is owned by the kingdom. And there's been so it's a deputy CEO, not even a CEO, deputy CEO role. And there's been a number of people that have applied, and they've now shortlisted 150 people that now need to go through assessments and interviews. So I'm part of the people assessing these people. 150 senior CEOs of different companies, local and expats globally, who are looking. Why? Because to be that close to the king and to do work for the king is something that is prized in the kingdom and in the nation. But it is the same in every kingdom. If you go to England, to be at the royal service of Her Majesty the Queen is something that is prized for a lot of people. So Moses understood this, and he says, but I'm a nobody. I'm not a noble person. What is he actually saying here? He's saying, I'm not good enough. I don't have a name. I don't have history. I don't have a long CV and credentials that say you qualify. And one of the things God looks for when he qualifies somebody to take on a complex role like what he has called us to do is somebody who doesn't have a history of doing it. So you can never say, ukuthi hayi umgcotshwa ubani ngendlela ashuma ngakhona unamandla uma eshumayela kuphenduka abantu estadium. Chances are that man God will not call for a complex role like what he has called us to do.
Amen.
He calls that person for other things, but when he wants to showcase, ngoba it is not, when God does this, it is not about the person, it is about God. Amen. So God looks for a profile where God can shine
Amen.
And it can be clear and visible to everybody ukuthi this person law kuthiwani manje la kulento ze-affirmative action kuthiwa there's a term I forgot now, but when somebody is just affirmative action and you are not deserving and you are just ufagiwe wenzela umusa, and it becomes very clear that I know somebody influenced the appointment. This is what happened with me, and this is what happened with the ones before me. This is what happened with Moses.
Amen.
Where God says, I'm going to affirm you. This is affirmative action. Yes, you are nobody, but I want to be somebody. Me, God, want to be somebody.
Amen.
To these people through you.
Amen.
It's not about you.
Amen.
But the first excuse that Moses gave is, I'm a nobody. Who am I? Verse 13.
Verse 13. But Moses replied, when I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your ancestors sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? So what can I tell them?
So, the second thing Moses says is like, you know what? I don't even know that much about you. I don't even know that. It's not like I've walked with you for so long and I have answers for these people. When I go and tell them, and then they will ask me, what is his name? So this question, Bazalwana, is not a rhetorical question that Moses was asking. He's actually asking a real question. When I go there, why is this? Moses himself had not even formed his own spiritual identity. Remember, Moses grew up in Egypt, and he read the Egyptian philosophy, and therefore he was raised as an Egyptian prince. Later on, when he grows up, he gets to know that he's actually not Egyptian, he is Hebrew. But the Hebrew people in Egypt had no heritage of their own. They were not allowed to practice their own faith and religion. They were not allowed to call upon their own God in Egypt. They had to recognize and acknowledge and worship the Egyptian gods. And the Hebrews were schooled in Egyptian ways. And so they had been stripped of their spiritual heritage. Moses grew up in that. Even though he is born of a Hebrew woman, he is raised as an Egyptian prince. And therefore, when he escapes from Egypt, and we have he is only coming to terms and to a full realization of what it means to be a Hebrew. I have a friend, one of our friends, his family left South Africa when he was young. He must have been 4. And so they went to exile in the US. And he grew up in the US. So came back when he was older. He was in his mid-20s. And one of the struggles that Ulwazi has is that he can't speak any vernacular language. He can't speak isiZulu. His family is of a Zulu descent. He can't speak Sesotho. He can't. So even though he's African by identity, but a lot of the African traditions and heritage he doesn't have, because the family basically adopted a lot of the American lifestyles. And it's something that he struggled with. He's gotten better now because he came back quite a while now. He's gotten better, but when he came back, he was struggling, where he would overdo things. He would want to go ayeshisanyama, Soweto, and to feel like he's black. But as soon as he opens his mouth, guys will be like, And they will say whatever to him, like, you're not part of us. When I had a coconut, man, I was Zulu. And he's like, no, but guys, I can't. And I've never spoken the language, and with that accent. And he struggled. And of course, when he goes to white communities, he's not white. Moses was going through that, where he had just come back to his own people. He has left the palace, and now he has to form. But remember, even then, because the majority of the nation and the treasures of the nation were captured when the nation went through this when they left Jacob and Joseph and they went into Egypt. They therefore lost their identity. So there is actually nothing remaining. So even those who are now roaming free are just living their own life. And a sense of who the Hebrew God is not there. There is no institution to teach it. So when he says, uma ngitshela labantu ngithi uNkulunkulu wenu ongithumile ngizonikhulula ngiyothi ungubani bayothi ungubani ngithini. He is asking an honest question because he doesn't know God.
Amen.
He's heard about God. He's had an experience with God just now at the bush, the burning bush. But who is this God? Who are you? And God calls someone that knows nothing about God to say, right, I want you to go and represent me. How do I represent you when I don't even know you? Because I want to reveal myself. Paul ngiyakubonga Nkosi yezulu namhlanje ngoba levangeli ulifihlile kwabahlakaniphile walambula ezinganeni awunikanga abahlakaniphile. When I was 19, I really was just forming my idea of God. Yes, there is a God that I was taught at home, and I understood God. But I can tell you now that the God that I have showed to you, and the God that has showed himself to me, and therefore to you, is not the same God that I was taught at home. He's a different God. Same, but the way he has worked in this church and the way he has revealed himself in this generation right now, he's a totally different God.
Amen.
I'm doing things that I sometimes wonder if laba bantu abahamba ngaphambi kwami babesekhona if they would even approve. But I'm sure God would show them now. But these are some of the things that they themselves didn't necessarily get. These things were not revealed to them. Which is why you sometimes cannot blame abantu abadala abazinkonzo ngaleso sikhathi uma bebambela kuloko bethi asiboni ke lo wenzekayo khona manje thina. Because that's the God they know. And God is revealing himself in a new way. God has revealed himself in a powerful and new way over 21 years. But God needed somebody who doesn't have the mental block and the preconceived ideas of who God is.
Amen.
He wanted a fresh mind.
Amen.
Why did he appoint a young man, a young boy, not even a young man, a young boy? God wanted a fresh mind.
Amen.
That has an idea of who God is, like Moses had an idea of who the Hebrew God was, but doesn't have the trappings.
Amen.
And doesn't have the resistance. But this is what I know. And it was just easier. I was able to play with whatever God was giving me. God drops an idea in my mind and I just dance with the idea. I'm just saying this, right? I dance with the idea and easily accept and say, okay, this can work. Let's do this. And I'm sure there are certain things I've said on the pulpit that have shocked Abagotwa a couple of times because they're like, speaking la. And I'm like, what? We are here now. And it has required them, especially the older ones, to also let go of what they understood and work with this God that is at work today. But Moses is saying to God, look, God, I don't have all the answers. And maybe if you really want me to represent you, give me time, maybe 3 years. Let me build up an understanding of who you are and gather all the answers. God says, there's no time for you to have all the answers. You will get the answers. And he says to Moses, when he asks this question, God says, I am who I am. Just tell them, I am who I am. And that's not a very helpful answer to people who also don't know who God is. Because they themselves don't know who this God is. So, uzotshela ngoNkulunkulu wethu segibhithe. Ubani lo nkulunkulu? Uthi nginguye onguye. Oh well. There goes that. And that is God, bazalwane. That is God. So as we move into this, kubalulekile ukuthi ungamhlakanipheli uNkulunkulu. Ungamhlakanipheli uNkulunkulu. But part of that, I also want you to know that as leaders, we don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers. In as much as I didn't have all the answers in 1999, I still don't have all the answers. Today I get asked certain questions that I think, this is interesting. And sometimes I need to look, like I know, sometimes we need to put on the armor of faith and the armor of the road and look like you are. But meanwhile, I really don't have an answer. And I think I've got the humility today of saying, I don't know the answer. But let's search for that together. But I don't know the answer. I don't know what the future holds. But I know that there is a future. Ukuthi yoba kanjani, I don't know. And that is partly what following is about, where you are following somebody who from the beginning didn't have the answers, didn't believe that they were anybody, and therefore, even today, I still think I'm nobody. There are situations and places where people expect me to be, and I'm like, why do I have to be there? Because I don't think I qualify to be there. But there are people who say, no, you need to be there, because you are representing God, and therefore you can't withdraw and disengage. So that fear, that insecurity of being a nobody, how can I stand before kings? Even today it still stands. Even after 21 years, there are places where I feel I don't think I need to be here. Or even if I wanted to, I don't know how to access that, because I don't come with a title. I have this title, but I don't come with a noble background. I don't come with certain credentials. I'm a nobody. And I remain a nobody. Ukuthula kubazalwane. Ukuthula kwabayingcwele. We don't have all the answers. But what we show is who God is at that time. And what God reveals at that time. So today God says to you, I am who I am right now. And that's what you get to see. And it's not pre-cooked. It is not preconceived. It is what God reveals at that time. Ukuthula kubazalwane. Ukuthula kwabayingcwele. Chapter 4, verse 1.
Then Moses answered the Lord, but suppose the Israelites do not believe me and will not listen to what I say. What shall I do if they say that you did not appear to me?
Can you repeat that, please?
1. Then Moses answered the Lord, but suppose the Israelites do not believe me and will not listen to what I say. What shall I do if they say that you did not appear to me?
And that is the greatest test that every spiritual leader will go through. Suppose the Israelites do not believe me and they do not hear me when I say that you have sent me, and instead they say you did not appear to me. Suppose they say, hayi ngizithumile angithunywanga wena. What shall I say? This man has this fear even before he embarks on the job. Because he understood people. He understood the resistance that people will go through. And even in Mosaic times, people had the inclination, the propensity to say uzmisile. And his thing is, how am I going to even prove? Because hayi ukuthi ubonakele la kimi phambi kwabantu, ubonakele nami ngingedwa. Ungithuma ngingedwa. Uthi ngihambe ngiyotshela abantu ukuthi awuhambanga wena Nkosi wayobatshela ukuthi nginithumela uMoses. Ngakho mlaleleni, utshela mina ukuthi uyangithuma. Uma ngifika kubona ngibatshela ukuthi ungithumile, bayokholwa kanjani ukuthi ngempela ngithunyiwe? And what if they actually turn back and say ayangithunywanga wena? That is a big fear in leadership. A big fear in leadership. to not come across as umzenzisi ozenzayo. uJesu Kristu uqobo wakhe indodana kaNkulunkulu bathi abaJuda uzenza indodana kaNkulunkulu, uyazenzisa enguNkulunkulu. But when he came, and with all the amazing things that happened ekuzaleni kwakhe, bathi abasewesele uma becula bathi waba ngumangaliso ukuzalwa kwakhe nokufa kwakhe kwaba ngumangaliso. Kodwa with even all of that, when God shows him up for who he is and what he had come to do, people say, nah, you are not the Son of God. You are calling yourself the Son of God. But you are not the Son of God. Ithi incegu ngaleli langa likamhla ka-11 July uma ekhuluma ngalesikhathi engiqale ngaso sasenzima uthi nanoma umoya engcwele wawukhulumile ngaphambili ukuthi uma umqalisi ephunyuzwa ukhona asemmisile oyoba incego, kodwa ngaleli langa kumele kubonakale kubantu bema abantu bathi akekho munye yoba khona.
Amen.
Uma wena uthi uNkulunkulu kumisile uyazithandela lo msebenzi. And if there's anything that people can do, even in politics, to switch you off as a leader, is to say, oh, uyazifunela, uthanda isikhundla. Nobody wants that to be said about them, because it makes you, it has a taste to it, doesn't it? It has a taste of ukuthi you are power hungry. So people use that, and when they do so, they know ukuthi it hits a certain spot in your insecurity. Very manipulative people will go for that. They will say, uzimisile noma uyazithandela. And now you can't. I was told last year when we were going to negotiations, and I was negotiating for the church to be united. And one of the leaders at Peaceville says, kodwa manje why uPG Nzuza ezikhulumela bekhona abanye yini ngathi uyayithanda nje lento. Well, you know, here we are. I mean, 20 years later, I can't hate it. I definitely would not. And here's the thing, right? At 19, now at 40, you can say maybe uyayithanda lento. And bazalwane, I want to say this to you now, because you know we need to take ngiqala ngivula inkonzo ngathi kumele simfakazele uNkulunkulu.
Amen.
And when Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, it got to a certain point. Today, I can tell you, I love what God has done in my life. Amen. I love it.
Amen.
And so, there is no politics that can make me deny it and say, hayi ngiyifuni lento ukuze ngibonakale sengazi ukuthi manje cha. Ngiyayithanda lento ngoba indlela uNkulunkulu azibonakalise ngayo kimina nakubantu bokuthi uNkulunkulu. Because over 20 years I've come to realize I could never ever even in my wildest dreams have done this but God. But when I was 19 and my hormones were raging and I wanted to be free, and for the first time I was free from all the stuffiness of home and church. You know, we went to church twice a day. A week, twice a day. Now that is too much, Bazalwane. Even I say so, that is too much. There's nothing wrong with going to church, but to go to church twice a day and then to have, and we also look with all respect for my church, I love our church, but to listen to the same message every day, umasa kuyinkonzo nanguya uJesu. So kuneyikhathi bazalwane la khona usemandleni usho ukuthi nanguya uJesu umbone nawe esekukhanyeni kuneyikhathi. I just want to go and play soccer right now. Say somebody who's not even good at soccer. I can't play soccer to save my life, but there were moments where I would give anything to go and play soccer and not be at church. You know, so to be free and give us a university and live alone at rest and on my own and do my own thing, it was bliss. It was life. It was like the world opening up suddenly. And so for anybody to claim that you wanted it and you loved it then, there must be something wrong in your head. Kukhona kumele kuhlolo la ikhanda lakho ukuthi ingane yakho ena 19 wena. Hayi thula bazalwane. Ukuthula kwabangcwele. But usathane ubenza abantu babe ziwula ecabangeni kwabo. And not even empathize to say, but this boy, something must have happened to this man. Like Colin was saying, niyenzeni manje ingane, aseyikhuleka kangaka, it required empathy from abantu abadala. But when people are not in touch with what you are going through as a leader, with what you are struggling with, you might not give expression to it, but what you are struggling with, they easily say, no, yes, Tandela. And what Moses said is exactly what happened. Because much as they responded when he came, but uma sebesendleleni naye uthi umbhalo umuntu wethu babuye bamhlubuka uMose ehlane. Uma sebesendleleni naye qala lo uNkulunkulu ammisele yena umsizi wakho Aaron. Ngabe uNkulunkulu akakhulumanga nangathi na ukhulume ngaye yedwa yini. Israel baqala manje bamchallenge Moses, and the very thing, and his anger and his emotions to God are around, but this is exactly what I was avoiding. This is exactly what I was avoiding. When Inceku talks ngalendlela uthi uma ulalela lenkulumo eqala ngo July 11 uthi yilento ke bazalwane engangiyibalekela, yilento esiyenzeka. The devil knows your insecurities. And so some of the challenges that we go through, that we experience, it's exactly what he knows you are afraid of, that he knows you know will happen. And he goes for that, to get you to succumb. And for me to get to this point 21 years later with all of those things and all of those messages, it can only be the grace of God. Ukuthula kubazalwane. Ukuthula kubazalwane. Yebo. Verse 10. Chapter 4, verse 10.
But Moses said, no, Lord, don't send me. I have never been a good speaker, and I haven't become one since you began to speak to me. I am a poor speaker, slow and hesitant.
But I've never been a speaker. I'm not a good speaker. Ever since you appeared to me, I've never ever spoken. I'm very slow, I'm very hesitant in amalimi. So why would you send me? Because the assumption is that the person who takes over that role to be the representative of God needs to be eloquent. And so be mindful, Gebazalwane, when sometimes you listen to us and you listen to me, Mina, I'm not a speaker. And say somebody who has spoken for an hour now. I'm not a speaker. But what some of you don't know is that I stutter. And I'm sure you pick it up mostly when I read I stutter. So what I'd learned, I come from a family of stutters. My grandfather stuttered, my father stuttered, of course, you know him. So I come from a family where people stutter. My sister used to stutter quite terribly when we were growing up. When we were growing up, I never stuttered. But somehow as I grew up, and I think but I learned to speak fast. And so I would jump over my words. And when I got into my profession, and each time I present, people would say, whoa, slow down. You're speaking too fast. And so I've learned to breathe and slow down. This is partly just your own speech training, not in speech therapy, but you train yourself to speak better. And now I realize when I speak, when I slow down, I get stuck at certain points of my speech. I'm sure you pick it up. I get stuck at certain points of my speech. And so I could never have been one to qualify on the basis of speech. And not just speech in terms of just the speaking ability, but in terms of being like Paul, to be able to argue. Now, when we read about Paul, he was very eloquent. Why good in arguments? But Paul himself says in one of the scriptures, he says, I'm not the most eloquent. There are people who speak better than I do. But I speak because I've been given the power to do so.
Amen.
And so sometimes people sit there and they look at you and they listen to you and they might judge you. Sometimes as members, as a church, you may judge a leader on the basis of his weakness, which he was very much aware of, which is why he didn't want to serve in the first place. Uma sengenwe usathi angisho nina sengikhuluma nje abantu. Uma ke abantu sebengenwe usathane ebese bethi hayi mayikhuluma simuzwa nokumuzwa kwenye inkathi. Kangivele ngishilo ukuthi angikwazi ukukhuluma. But God said, I want you with your stuttering, I want you to come and speak for me. When God appoints a person with all of those things and he qualifies this person, a church that is responsive to God says, simthande njalo, simthande ngabaze engingize njalo. Simthandela ungingiza, uma engingiza ngimuzwa kahle. Ngobani, God shows up. God shows up in those moments. God shows up for me and I find myself saying things and speaking things where I go home and I'm like, what was that? And you know that is God. You know that. So this personal transformation that we talk about of a leader is God working with all parts of this person and the weaknesses and saying, because of that and in spite of that, I want you to represent me. Amen. And verse 13.
Verse 13. But Moses answered, no, Lord, please send someone else.
Yes, repeat that.
But Moses answered, no, Lord, please send someone else.
Thank you. Umbambele, chapter 7. Exodus chapter 7. And with all these arguments that Moses is having with God, and God having, and God has called you. I didn't have too much struggle, for whatever reason. As you know the story, on that day I didn't have too much struggle. It was a shock, but I didn't resist much. But over the years, in the early stages, I had a lot of struggles. And I had a lot of pushback to God. And at every point, God has a response for you. God has a response for you. Why He made you? He made you. He knows your weaknesses. And He called you, so He knows exactly what He's getting. He knows the profile. He just wants you to give. What God has asked me to do in the 21 years is just make yourself available. All I want you to do is just make yourself available because I want to show myself to the people through you. Why me, Lord? And Moses says, just send someone else, not me. And God gets angry if you continue. God gets angry with Moses and says, listen, here's Aaron, and I'm appointing you as a God over Aaron, and he will be your prophet. So in other words, what I'm asking you to be to me, I am appointing Aaron to be to you, so that he may cover you. He may cover you where you are weak. But I'm still holding you accountable.
Amen.
7, verse 1 to 7.
Verse 1 to 7. The Lord said, I am going to make you like God to the king, and your brother Aaron will speak to him as a prophet. 2. Tell Aaron everything I command you, and you'll tell the king to let the Israelites leave his country. 3. 4. I'll make the king stubborn, and he will not listen to you, no matter how many terrifying things I do in Egypt. Then I'll bring severe punishment on Egypt and lead the tribes of my people out of the land. 5. The Egyptians will then know that I'm the Lord when I raise my hand against them and bring the Israelites out of their country. 6. Moses and Aaron did what the Lord commanded. 7. At the time when they spoke to the king, Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83.
Thank you so much. God set the order. God appointed Moses. Moses submits to God. And we know Moses to be one of the most successful leaders and spiritual leaders in the Bible, but not without any inadequacy or sense of inadequacy. God provides support through Aaron and says, Aaron will be there. Aaron, I'll speak to you, and you will command Aaron to say what I have said to you. And at the beginning, when they get there, it is Aaron who speaks. Moses tells Aaron what to do. It is Aaron who throws the stick on the ground and it turns into a snake. But over time, we actually learn of Moses speaking. And Moses starts addressing Pharaoh directly. The very person who said, Angwazi ukhuluma, I'm not qualified, I'm a nobody, I'm all of these things. But when he is in the role, when God starts working through him, he rises, he finds the power in him, the strength in him, and he starts speaking for God. Amen. And more, Aaron plays a more background role and a ceremonial role to Moses as an assistant. But Moses shows up as a true leader that is appointed by God. Ukuthula kubazalwane. Ukuthula kwabayingcwele. And I'm sharing these things with you so that you understand, and I'm using this because I find such resonance in it, that these are the things that leaders, spiritual leaders, I cannot speak for Umqalisi because, we have painted him, and I'm saying painted him, into this character and this person. But deep down, I know that there is a man who struggled with a whole lot of things from a leadership perspective. But he portrayed, and of course God used him in a way that he projected a sense of confidence, sense of power, and he led the church powerfully. I can speak very well about Inqegu because I saw him, and I heard him, and I observed and had the opportunity to analyze what was happening around him. And you had a powerful leader, an eloquent leader, a committed leader who remained with these feelings throughout. And he remembers on this day something that happened back then, because it was always at the back of his mind that one day these people will turn against me and want to oust me on something that I didn't even call upon myself. And so today, as we celebrate the 21 years and we celebrate the transformative power of a calling, I want you as a church to know that even 21 years later, all I do on a daily basis is submit. I wake up and submit to what God wants me to do. Amen. A number of these things have still not been resolved. In other words, a number of my inadequacies when I was young have still not been resolved. I still feel I'm not deserving. I still feel the church and the mandate is greater than me when I look at what God is commanding for the future of the church. And it becomes even more difficult when you call for those things to be and to come into place and people resist, because it amplifies your feelings of, I'm not the person to lead it. But God still says, even today, I want you to lead. I have not even had a small sense from God that said, where God says to me, now it is enough. Let alone him saying to me, actually, I didn't call you. These 20 years were a mistake. Every year, God has confirmed. Every single year, God has confirmed. The things that you say, where you say, I stand out in whatever way, I don't know how, but it is something that even people who are not in the church would say. They say, somebody actually said to me, you seem to underestimate what you have. Somebody who's not in the church. Because you walk with this. It is not humble to say I'm humble. That can't be true. but you walk with this sense of self-deprecation, ukuzehlisa, that you feel like you are not deserving of occupying the space that you've been called to occupy. And these are people that say, charge out, be bold, step out, and own the space and be what God has called you to be. Some of those things of not having all the answers. Today, 21 years later, I still don't have all the answers. And I appreciate that we can formulate things together. I can only tell you what God says to me. I can only tell you what God reveals to me. And most times God reveals things in part. This is what must happen. But how it is going to happen, God doesn't say. But God says this is what needs to happen. And so we step into, I make a decision, this is what's going to happen. But together we then, through the help of the Spirit of God and the wisdom that He gives us an ability to work out how it needs to happen. And at the end of the day, we see that it actually turns out much better than we would have imagined, because God has ordained it from the beginning. And it is important for you to be responsive, even when I don't have the answers. I'm asking for that kind of support right now, even where I don't have the answers. But to know that God has the answers. To know that God has... One of the things that really bothers my mind a lot is, Lord, if anything were to happen to me, what would happen to the church? It bothers me. But I am learning to be comfortable with that and live in the fact that God has the answers. Even if I had a son who was 12 or 15 right now, that might not necessarily be the answer. God always has the answer. Amen. Always has the answer. Amen. And God's answer is not what people are expecting. God's answer, God's solution to a problem, He looks where people are not looking. Amen. See, when Holy passed away in 1995, people were looking in places. But I can tell you right now, I don't think anybody was looking here. Certainly I wasn't, and I know the church wasn't. But God looks where people are not looking. And God has placed answers where people have not even begun to understand that could be an answer. And when it shows up as an answer that God provides, it shows up completely. I still live with a sense of not knowing God. I think I know Him in part, but the God of 2020 is not the same God who will appear in 2030. And the God of 2030, I still need to understand Him and understand how He works and what He wants from me as a leader, but what He will want from you as a church as well. Amen. And these are all the things that, and the last point, Moses, send somebody else. Maybe right now I don't feel like that, but there have been moments where I felt, okay, you've done enough with me now. Somebody else's turn. Can you relieve me just so that I can enjoy life whilst I'm still young? And I think every year it becomes clear that God is not going to leave me anytime soon. And I've made peace with that. I'm at peace with the fact that this is a role, a life that I'm going to live for a very long time until God says it is over. One of the things that is quite important in the scripture, especially chapter 7, is that Aaron was actually older than Moses. He was an older brother than Moses. The Bible says he was 83 and Moses was 80 when they stood before Pharaoh. And the fact that God provides Aaron as support to Moses, in fact, when you read the scripture in chapter 3, where God says, here's Aaron, he's actually approaching right now. Aaron had all the qualities, that Moses didn't have. So Aaron did not grow up in Egypt. He was raised by their parents. And so he understood the Hebrew God more than Moses did. He understood the Hebrew traditions, the Hebrew heritage. Aaron was more eloquent. He was confident and bold. He was a risk taker. He spoke with clarity more than his younger brother. And if we talk about order and the sense of being somebody, Aaron being the eldest already, because that is a traditional role, already as a firstborn son, had a title of sort that gave him a right over certain things, more than his brother. So all the things that Moses uses to disqualify himself, Aaron had all of that. And when God appoints Aaron to support Moses, he says, here's somebody who's got all of these things, but I haven't called him. And I know that there are a lot of people, not so much in my family, but especially in the church, who were more and better qualified to lead the church. Back then, people who knew the history of the church, ababazi umqalisi ababangakhuluma amazwi kamqalisi onke, ababazi inkonzo kusuka ekuqaleni kwayo, ababazi imithetho yenkonzo, abaseva kanye nenceka abanye babengama-trustees, who had all the right credentials, and uma beme pulpit bekhuluma, khona enye insizwa last year umas negotiator kwathi kuzosuka umgcojana ngathi hey yabona le nsizwa ezokhuluma ngaphambi kwakho iyakhuluma ke le nsizwa khona abagcojwa abanesiphiwo sokukhuluma who can argue, and these are the people who can convince people even against the will of God, because they have the history, they have the understanding, and they have the gift yokukhuluma. And so they can argue from here to Wuhan in China and come back without corona. They have the gift. And they are qualified. And God says to them, perfect, I want you, but I want you to serve under this one. It takes humility for someone to say, mina ngazi konke ngibone konke kodwa uNkulunkulu akakhulumanga nami. Amen. Wayithi umqalisi umasizwa. Ngakho I've gotten used to this, because when I listen to these stories, umqalisi wayethi uNkulunkulu wayengabonakali ngani kuyihlo. And we laugh about this, but it pains me, because here's a man that God appointed at a very young age against his will. And he's being challenged by people who were not there when God appeared to him, who were not there when he started the church. And he now finds himself having to defend what God did to him. Uthi uNkulunkulu wayengabonakali ngani ke pho kuyihlo abonakale kumina. Ngathi ngazosho njalo ukuthi pho uNkulunkulu wayengabonakali ngani kuwena. But there are people who seem to know better about this church and about what God intends for this church more than God himself. But humility in leadership is those people with all of that history stepping in and saying, sazi konke, but lo nkulunkulu obonakele kuwena manje asimazi ufunani kithi manje. And therefore we are willing to submit and walk and help you with our gifts and understanding, but submit to the God that has called you. Amen. That's what God called of Aaron. With all your gifts and all your eldership, if there's such a thing, and all your qualifications and qualities, I gave you those gifts so that you may support your brother. Your brother that you didn't even form a bond with because he didn't grow up at home. But you now need to support him. And I'm thankful for every gift and every form of support, which I said earlier, I know Gutum Holy Negu procured for me, secured for me on this day. And today, as we thank God and lift up our voices in celebration of what God has done, I have these words for the church in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 3. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 3, and this is to the entire church and even to those that are at home that I have not seen in a very long time since the start of this pandemic. Verse 3 says, I thank God whom I serve as my ancestors did, with a clear conscience. As night and day I constantly remember you in my prayers. Recalling your tears, I long to see you so that I may be filled with joy again. uNkulunkulu makabusise, uNkulunkulu makasandisele izinsuku, uNkulunkulu makasiphe eminye iminyaka azozibonakalisa ngayo. Ngithi uNkulunkulu makaguqise izitha zebandla zibe senabelo sezinyawo zakhe, ibandla lakhe lisimame, hayi ngesikhathi sami kuphela nangasemva kwesikhathi sami. uNkulunkulu asiyamamise njalo ibandla lakhe, niqhubeke njalo nisekela ubuholi bebandla elingcwele. Umholi, umholi, umoya, umoya, inkonzo, inkonzo, imfundiso, imfundiso. Thula makube kini nonke. Jehova mninima la Jehova mninima la ngoyenza intando ya